Dr. Manoj Khatri he has started the Department of Rheumatology in SN Medical College. He is the first rheumatologist in the Medical College Jodhpur. So I welcome him. Please start the talk because we are already late on the approach to polyarthritis.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for inviting me for this presentation. I'm part of knowledge form itself, and it has been like I had a presentation last year on ANA, and I chose this easy topic this time because I believe this is a commoner disorder which we see in our OPDs, and in the season of dengue, we are going to see more and more of these patients. So my topic for discussion is approach to polyarthritis. Okay. So actually there are a lot of causes. When it comes to cause of polyarthritis, we call it when there are five or more joints which are involved at the same time. So if you consider there are a lot of differentials, the differentials may reach in hundreds. But what we know is most of the patients who come to with us with arthritis have very limited diagnosis. Rheumatoid arthritis, spondyloarthritis, IB-related arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, SLE, and ANA related to connective tissue disorders. Sometimes it might be because of vasculitis. Okay. So I'll tell how we approach a patient of arthritis. So what we do is first we look whether the patient has arthritis or polyarthalgia. Then if we confirm that the patient has polyarthritis, we go ahead, look for the pattern of joint involvement. Once we look for pattern of joint involvement, we look for extra-articular manifestations. Then there are laboratory tests which help us to diagnose, and sometimes we need radiological investigations too. Not in each and every case. Okay. So when it comes to polyarthritis versus polyarthalgia, so there are few features of inflammation in joints. First is swelling. None of these features confirm that the patient has polyarthritis against polyarthalgia. Swelling might be because of something else, like patient may have osteoarthritis, which because of that the joint might be swollen. Sometimes there might not be actually any swelling, but we may notice that there is a swelling. Sometimes swelling might be outside the joint, especially when it comes to elbows and knees, and we consider there is joint swelling. Morning stiffness lasting for 30 minutes. This is a good clinical feature, but this is basically a subjective phenomena, and we often see patients of polyarthalgia complaining of morning stiffness which lasts for more than 30 minutes. Redness is though a great sign of inflammation, is rarely seen in patients of polyarthritis. You can see in patients of infectious arthritis and gout, but it is rarely seen in patients of inflammatory polyarthritis. Movement restriction do occur secondary to inflammation, but that can happen even without that. Like osteoarthritis or burn case may have movement restriction because of weakness. Patient might not be moving the limb for long. They may also develop movement restriction and raised inflammatory markers. This is also again an important finding because when we actually have confusion between inflammatory arthritis and polyarthalgia, ESR and CRP are never that high. They are always borderline, or even they might be normal. So though these findings help us, collectively also when considering all these things all together, we will not be able to tell the patient whether the patient has inflammatory arthritis or inflammatory polyarthalgia at that same point. We may ask the patient to follow up in next visit if the patient develops joint swelling or classic features of inflammation in near future. Okay. So let's first talk about polyarthalgia because this is far more common than polyarthritis. Okay. And we have differentials for them. First is fibromyalgia. These patients often complain of pain around shoulders, back, girdle. Often they are aged, so they have osteoarthritis knee along with that, and often confused with polyarthritis. Other one is hypermobility syndrome. This is, I'll come to that in next slide. This is quite common actually. 3 to 5% of population in North India are suffering from hypermobility syndrome. And in my clinic, I'll tell 10% of patients who are actually diagnosed with RA do not have RA. they have hypermobility syndrome. So this is that common, and the patients are often misdiagnosed to have inflammatory polyarthritis. Osteoarthritis, actually when it is limited to knees, they can be easily identified, but hand osteoarthritis often misdiagnosed as RA and inflammatory polyarthritis. To come to a few others, osteomalacia, thyrotoxicosis, hyperparathyroidism, certain malignancies may also confuse you with polyarthralgia. They may have features of polyarthritis. Then there are some mimickers where you do whatever you want to do. If you see these hands, you will think that the patient has RA. First one is spondyloepiphyseal dysplasia. This is kind of progressive pseudo-rheumatoid dysplasia. So children often comes to us with joint swelling. The joints are large, they are painful, but here mostly the patient do not have morning stiffness. If we palpate, we can find that this is bony swelling, there is no boggy swelling, which we see in synovitis. And often the patients have short stature. X-rays will obviously give us more clues toward the diagnosis. So this is a condition where almost always I get the diagnosis of inflammatory arthritis or GIA, polyarticular GIA. Whenever I see a patient with this feature, they are always labeled as GIA polyarticular. Second one is diabetic ketoarthropathy. We often see in patients with long-standing diabetes, mostly with type 1 diabetes mellitus, and they can also be diagnosed as RA mistakenly in clinics. Other than that, I often see the patients of Parkinsonism. They often do develop deformities in their hands because of lack of mobility, and they are also confused to have inflammatory arthritis. This is the benign hypermobility syndrome. Okay. So this is quite common. Around 3 to 5% of population is suffering from this. What we check is we look for hypermobility at 5 points, and we give marks. For each knee, we give 1 mark if there is extension beyond 10 degree. If the patient can touch the floor with both the palms, we give another 1 mark. For fingers, we give 1 mark if in the 5th finger there is extension of more than 90 degree. If the patient can touch the thumb toward the flexor part of forearm, we give 1 mark. And if the elbow is having extension beyond 10 degree, we give 1 more extra mark. A score of 5 or more is considered to be diagnostic of BHMS, benign hypermobility syndrome, and this is very common and often misdiagnosed to have rheumatoid arthritis. So once we have made sure the patient has inflammatory arthritis, not inflammatory polyarthralgia or polyarthralgia, we look for pattern. So what we look for is, we look for whether the patient has acute or chronic disease, because not often patients with inflammatory arthritis who have chronic actually have viral polyarthritis. Viral polyarthritis usually lasts less than 6 weeks or at least less than 12 weeks, not more than that. Then we look for symmetric versus asymmetric arthritis. Now what I'll be coming to is to a few limited arthritis which we often see in clinic. I won't be talking about Behçet disease, I won't be talking about autoinflammatory disorders, I won't be talking about sarcoidosis, which are rare. I'll be talking about the cases which we see in clinics very often, okay, day-to-day practice. So if it comes to symmetrical arthritis, we see that patients with RA, SLE, area-related diseases like Sjogren syndrome, MCTD, all these patients actually have symmetric polyarthritis. But when it comes to asymmetric polyarthritis, we often see it in patients of peripheral SPA. That include reactive arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, peripheral SPA, and others. Then we want to look for is pattern. What kind of pattern? Whether it is migratory, additive, or intermittent. So migratory pattern is not very often seen. It is classic of acute rheumatic fever, can be seen in other viral fevers also, not frequently noted. Additive is the most common pattern. Among the polyarthritis, patient may develop joint pain at one at one knee, and later on the patient may develop polyarthritis. This is the commonest pattern. Intermittent pattern is also little uncommon, but we can see in patients of gout, adult onset still disease, and palindromic rheumatism. I have not mentioned a palindromic rheumatism, but that is also quite a common pattern in our area, where we see palindromic pattern of arthritis, which lasts for few days with the intervals which are totally symptom free. Now, distribution of joint. pain. What are the joints which are involved? So if we talk about osteoarthritis, it involves DIPs and PIPs. It do not involve MCPs. It do not involve wrist joint. RA actually do not involve distal interphalangeal joint. When it comes to psoriatic arthritis, they predominantly involve DIPs. They can involve any joint, PIPs, MCPs, wrist, all of those can be involved. They can have dactylitis too. CPPD is crystal arthritis, where you often see the involvement of wrist and MCPs. PIPs and DIPs are not involved. Gout can involve any joint, but usually it is very asymmetrical, and usually whole digit is not involved. One joint at one limb, one finger, other joint at another finger. And erosive osteoarthritis has similar pattern as osteoarthritis. There is no difference between these two. Now I'm talking about the common diseases and their pattern of arthritis, their age of involvement and all that. Okay. So if a patient of polyarthritis comes to you who has the age of around 60 years and do not have any clinical feature to suggest any other connective tissue disorder, then patient is most likely having RA. But at the same time, if we see the same patient who is female in the age of 25 years, we need to do ANA, because the chances of SLE, Sjogren syndrome, MCTD is quite high in those age group. So this slide says us that the RA is more common among the age group of 40 to 60. SLE is common in age group which is less than 40, which is childbearing age group. Psoriatic arthritis can occur in any age group. Gout and crystal arthritis usually occur late, after the 60s mostly. Reactive arthritis occurs in young age group, and systemic vasculitis occurs in the age of 40 to 60s. And when it comes to pattern of arthritis, we can see RA, SLE and systemic vasculitis have similar pattern, whereas patients with reactive arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis and PSA has similar pattern. And in crystal arthritis, they usually develop episodic arthritis to begin with. Later on, they may develop polyarthritis, which take years together. Then we talk about other musculoskeletal manifestations. We have left the joint, we are going out of joints. Now, what are the other musculoskeletal manifestations we often see is enthesitis, dactylitis, inflammatory low back pain, and proximal muscle weakness. Okay. So, when it comes to enthesitis, we see in group of patients what we call is SPA, spondyloarthritis. So, primary spondyloarthritis, psoriatic arthritis, reactive arthritis, and IBD-related arthritis, all of them can have enthesitis. Number one is the most common diagnosis here. Number two is last one is the least common cause of enthesitis among these. I have mentioned the names in that favor, in that line only. Dactylitis, psoriatic arthritis is the most common cause. Reactive arthritis, IBD-related arthritis, SPA, sarcoidosis, gout can also cause dactylitis. Inflammatory low back pain we see in patients of SPA, psoriatic arthritis, reactive arthritis, and IBD-related arthritis. And proximal muscle weakness can be because of myositis, and we can see in among the patients of myositis, SLE, MCTD, and overlap syndrome. Now, what is enthesis? So, enthesis is a part of tendon which actually attaches to the bone. That transition part is enthesis. So, it can be because a tendon attaching to the bone, or it can be a ligament attaching to the bone. So, this transitional part is different from the tendon and from the bone. That is what we call enthesis. And the inflammation of enthesis is called enthesitis, and we see in patients of SPA. What are the common sites? Plantar fasciitis, Achilles enthesitis, enthesis around the elbows, and then back pain. So, most often the pain in back, in axial SPA or ankylosing spondylitis is because of enthesitis. Next term what we talked about is dactylitis. Now, what is dactylitis? Dactylitis is inflammation of whole of the disease. So, we call it psoriasis like a finger. It doesn't mean that it should need to involve whole finger, but the swelling should be beyond the joint. So, it often involves joint, means there is synovitis in the joint, as well as there is tenosynovitis of the ligaments. So, here we can see in the left side we have fourth toe which is involved as dactylitis, and the right side third toe is involved, which is dactylitis. So we have left the musculoskeletal system. What we now talk about is extra-articular manifestations. So what we often ask to a patient is oral ulcers, genital ulcers, oral and ocular sicca, alopecia, malaris, DLERS, Reynolds phenomena, psoriasis and other skin lesions, and history of IBD. Any patient who is coming to us with polyarthritis, I ask for all these questions. I need to find if there is anything significant, because diagnosing RA is easy, but missing the diagnosis of SLE can be detrimental. Okay. So these are the clinical features. So these are classical images which we may not see among the patients. So first one is oral ulcers of SLE, second one is malaris, third one is DLERS of SLE, fourth one is Gottron papules, which we see in dermatomyositis. Then there is heliotrope res, which we see in dermatomyositis. In the last, we have Reynolds phenomena, which is often seen in patients of systemic sclerosis and MCTD. Other extra-articular manifestation, high-grade fever. We often get the patient who has high-grade fever with polyarthritis. So if the duration is low, a small duration infection is most likely possibility, but that is not necessary. SLE, vasculitis, AOSD, macrophage activation syndrome, IBD, anticipated syndrome, and malignancies are the other causes. It is very unlikely the patient of rheumatoid arthritis will have high-grade fever without vasculitis. They are patient of psoriatic arthritis, patient of AS are not likely to have high disease activity, or are not likely to have fever because of their high disease activity. SLE, vasculitis, AOSD, IBD can have fever because of high disease activity. Okay. Then we need to look for uveitis. In the eye, if there is a history of uveitis, often the patient do not give good history of uveitis. It is seen in peripheral SPA, psoriatic arthritis, sarcoidosis, and IBD. Scleritis we see in RA and ANCA vasculitis, and sicca we see in Sjogren syndrome, RA, and systemic sclerosis. We need to look beyond them in systemic manifestations also. Pleural effusion can be seen in RA, SLE, MCTD, AOSD, ILD we see in systemic sclerosis, MCTD, Sjogren syndrome, dermatomyositis. Lung nodules we see in ANCA vasculitis and RA, diffuse cellular hemorrhage we see in patients of SLE and small vessel vasculitis, and pulmonary artery hypertension we see in systemic sclerosis, MCTD, SLE, and Sjogren. Okay. So once we look for all these manifestations, very often we become quite confident of our diagnosis. But we need to have tests to back our diagnosis at few times. So I'll talk about the fallacies about the test that we often use. So I'll be talking about rheumatoid factor, anti-CCP antibody, and ANA, which is often ordered by rheumatologists and physicians in patients of arthritis. So when it comes to rheumatoid factor, 4% of healthy population has RF positivity. When it comes to old age patients like who are in their 60s and 70s, around 25% of patients will be RF positive. Okay, so a patient of 60-year who is 65-year-old or 60-year-old comes to us with DIP and PIP joint pain with almost Haberdon and Burchard nodule. They are likely to have RF positive, and sometimes are labeled as RA also, which is not the correct diagnosis. So RA is not a great test. RF is not a great test to diagnose RA. Okay, it is often seen in other patients also. Like when it comes to connective tissue disorder in rheumatoid arthritis, it is seen in around 70% patients. But in Sjogren, it is more often positive. Around 80-85% of patients of Sjogren will be RF positive. MCTD will also have 60% positivity. SLE will have around 30% positivity, and dermatomyositis will also have around 10% positivity. Other than connective tissue disorders also, RF is often positive in patients with hepatitis B, hepatitis C, bacterial endocarditis, leprosy, ILD, sarcoidosis, silicosis, asbestosis, and primary biliary cirrhosis, cholangitis. So today only I got a patient who actually has leprosy for years together, had lepra reaction arthritis, and was misdiagnosed to her as RA because he was RF positive. Okay. And she did not respond actually to 5 mg prednisone. She needed higher doses of steroids for lepra reaction. When it comes to anti-CCP antibody, this is better test than RF if you want to confirm the diagnosis of RA. It has around 67 or 70% sensitivity, but the specificity is quite good. 96% of specificity, which is quite good. They are rarely detected in healthy patients, and hepatitis C patients that we had seen around 50% of hepatitis C patients are RF positive. They are detected in 8 to 16% of patients of psoriatic arthritis. So actually RF is seen only in 5% of patients of psoriatic arthritis, but they are unluckily detected in more patients of psoriatic arthritis. They are often detected in 10% of patients in Sjogren's syndrome and SLE, and their presence in a patient is actually associated with poorer prognosis. They have more erosive disease, more chances of cardiovascular mortality. So positivity with anti-CCP is associated with poorer prognosis. When it comes to ANA, this is the third test which we often order. So when it comes to ANA should always be ordered by ANA by IF, immunofluorescence. Already discussed last time, ANA, a nucleus has thousands of antigens which we can detect with antibodies, and when we do it by ELISA, there are hardly 10 to 20 antigens which are put on plate which can be detected. So very often you are not going to miss SLE, but you are going to miss dermatomyositis, systemic sclerosis, Sjogren's syndrome sometimes if you do the ANA by ELISA. So when it comes to ANA, around almost 100% of patients with SLE will have ANA positivity. It was 98 to 100% earlier, but now the classification criteria says that the patient should be ANA positive to actually put forward for the criteria. In scleroderma, around 95% will be positive. Now term comes, even in rheumatoid arthritis, 40% of patients or 45% of patients will be ANA positive. Sjogren's syndrome will also have positivity. Drug-induced lupus have 100% positivity. MCT will have 100% positivity. You may miss dermatomyositis, polymyositis if the patient is ANA negative. Then in other diseases also like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, somebody has hypothyroidism, they may also have positivity of around 30 to 50%. And how much the healthy population is positive? So the titer is important. What titer the test is done. What we often see is the titer which is done in market is like 1 in 40. If you consider 1 in 40, around 20 to 30% of population is likely to be positive. This is USA data. In India, this is not true. In 1 in 80, we have around 5% population, which is healthy population, which is positive. So a patient with polyarthritis being ANA positive doesn't mean the patient has ANA-related connective tissue disorder. The patient may simply have RA, or patient may actually not have inflammatory arthritis also. Okay. Now radiology, we rarely need the help of radiology. We need it in cases where we actually have doubt. So MRI and USG can actually pick up the synovitis, synovial inflammation. MRI can pick up the bone marrow edema in patients of arthritis. In X-rays, we can see juxta-articular osteopenia, and sometimes we can see erosions. CT can best detect the erosions if you have a doubt. DECT, dual energy CT, is not easily available, can detect crystals very nicely, and USG can also detect crystals. Now what we have is, when we talk about erosions, there are pattern of erosions that we see. Okay. So the patients of RA will have bare area erosions, that is at the end of joint. If you see, I put a mark at the end of that, you can see. But when it comes to psoriatic arthritis, there is usually new bone formation along with that. And so in the next slide, you can see that there is mouse ear appearance at DIP joint. When it comes to gout, what we see is, we see overhanging margins. Okay. And the erosions might actually not involve joints also. It might be periarticular also. This is not because of joint involvement itself. This is because of the gouty deposition or tophaceous deposition within the joints, and that is why there will be hanging margins. And osteoarthritis will have erosive osteoarthritis will actually have central erosions. There will be complete regular erosions that we can see here. Okay. Then ultrasound. This can be called a third hand for rheumatologists. They are trained actually to use ultrasound, but they do not have, most of the rheumatologists do not have this facility with them. So I'll talk about only two things here. Actually, we can detect the synovitis by bulky synovium. We can see the Doppler signal in them. What we are seeing here is double contour sign and contour calcinosis, with which we can actually detect urate crystal deposition as well as CPPD crystal deposition. With this, I'll be finishing my slides. Thanks for patience listening.